You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the political editor of Wales Online, Ruth Mosalski, and the political editor of The Sun, Harry Cole. They'll be with us right through until midnight, and they are smiling about that. Give us a smile. Yes, they are. So let's see what's on the front pages of some of those papers now. Well, the Metro leads on Team GB's Olympic success. Ministers urge caution as COVID cases plunge again. That's in The Guardian. Also a picture of an emotional Tom Daley there. On the front of The Telegraph, new plans to make burglars wear tags after they're released from jail to try and tackle reoffending. The Times follows its main headline. The Prime Minister gets tough on burglars. Another crime story in the Express, their own investigation revealing more than 20,000 officers were assaulted during the pandemic. And the FT reports that the US government has blocked an attempt to create the world's biggest insurance broker. So, taking us through the newspapers tonight, Ruth Mosalski and Harry Cole. Good evening, welcome to you both. Let's start with you first of all, Ruth. Let's have a look at The Guardian and their front page there. Ministers urge caution as COVID cases plunge again. The government somehow sort of rowing back on, previous thoughts of Freedom Day, aren't they?
Well, it's interesting. So number 10 are here saying that, while infections are at their lowest level for 3 weeks, it's still, we're not out of the woods. And I think the devolved administrations are going to be delighted to hear this sort of cautious note from Whitehall. Let's not forget the Mark Jacobs in particular here in Wales has been extremely cautious. In some ways, he's been criticised for that very early on. And actually, that's proved to be a very successful tactic for him. That hasn't always been the case coming from Downing Street. And actually, to hear this note of caution that we're not out of the woods, we don't know what the effect yet, because this data doesn't include the releasing of restrictions in England on July 19th. So there's still a lot to look at. It could be 2 or 3 weeks before we know the full picture in terms of cases and infections from that Freedom Day release. So there's still plenty of questions to ask, and I think it's quite nice to hear that tone of caution coming from Downing Street today.
Yes, Harry, and the article also pointing to the fact that experts point to the number of COVID-19 patients in hospital in England, which has passed 5,000 for the first time since mid-March, and that as a sign of the pandemic not being over.
Yeah, no, I don't think anyone thinks it's over. However, I think everyone is fascinated by what we've seen in the last 6 days. Just a week ago, I was sitting in this very spot talking to your colleague, and it didn't look anything like this. But then, in a weird way, we've all been looking at the COVID dashboard each day at 4 o'clock when it gets updated, sort of willing it to be going the right way. And it has. It's down 50% in the week. It's down more. I think it's about 59% since that peak we saw on about the 16th of July, where there were 60,000 cases, and everyone's a bit baffled. There's lots of sort of scientists are out in the airwaves today saying it could be the schools are no longer kids are no longer at school. It could be the fact that means that fewer lateral flow tests are being done. It could be a knock-on from the Euros. We saw Scotland's rates start to fall as soon as they crashed out very earlier, I should add, in that competition. Or it could just be the sunshine, or, fingers crossed, it is this sort of mythical state of the bug running out of people to infect by hitting this massive wall of vaccinated people. Over 80% of the UK now has been jabbed with at least one jab, and those second doses are catching up. So I think they're absolutely right to be cautious, but I think we're also well within our rights to be crossing our fingers and praying that this is going the right way. And we just want to see that green light on the dashboard light up as it did this week, just stay there and translate into a decline in hospitalisations, as we all know, in a lag of a couple of weeks.
Yes, no, that's what we're all praying for. Let's move on to The Telegraph, and they're saying over half of COVID hospital cases test positive after admission. Ruth, take us into this story, this element of the story.
Yes, this is a Telegraph story from tomorrow's front, which is that the question here is whether the level of pressure on the NHS is currently being overstated. So this is leaked data to the Telegraph, and it's saying that for English NHS trusts, just 44% of people were classed as being hospitalised with COVID or tested positive before they were admitted to hospital. And we've always known all along that, the question about when people have it is hospital contributing to it. That's why, let's not forget, lots of hospitals are saying, please don't come unless it's absolutely necessary. But this, I think my worry with this sort of story is that right now it feels like we're at such a tipping point. And saying things like this is overstating or could be overstating the pressure on the NHS sort of is quite a dangerous narrative in terms of the anti-vax movement, as the scenes we've seen all over the world. Here in Cardiff at the weekend, we had protesters outside the First Minister's private home. He doesn't have an official residence; he has a private house, and the protesters were outside there, which was a move that was universally condemned. But I think my concern with sort of saying, actually, maybe the NHS isn't in as much trouble as maybe it appears, is it could sort of feed into that sort of dangerous narrative at a time when that cautious note has been espoused from Downing Street.
Harry, does this sort of headline worry you that people might not present at a hospital because they're terrified of what might happen once they're there?
Yeah, no, that has been an overwhelming problem for the last 18 months, that people have been unable or unwilling to go to hospital. We've read awful, horrific case studies, real people who have died at home with heart attacks and various other ailments because they didn't want to go into hospital. But I think, this story, I have no doubt that the sourcing in the Telegraph's health editor, she's had a very good COVID pandemic, if you can put it in that fashion, of stuff that seems to be bang on the money over the course of the last 18 months. But at the same time, obviously, you've got other NHS leaders out in other papers today and into tomorrow, I expect, saying, look, actually, it is starting to tick up. But, again, I go back to that point of, look at the numbers. The data we have now, at this stage of the pandemic, far outscores any data we had at any other stage in this pandemic. And there are 5,000 people now nudging into hospital. Yes, some of them probably did catch it there rather than being admitted with COVID. But at the peak of the second wave, certainly, when once again we all stayed at home to relieve that pressure on the NHS, there were 35,000 people in hospital with COVID. So, the numbers are quite starkly different.
Yeah. Should we talk about some good news? Let's have a look at the Metro front page. And although he's in tears, this is a happy story. Tom Daley there pictured on the front of the Metro, emotional at his gold medal that he received today, Ruth.
Yeah, I'm sure I wasn't the only person sat this morning in my pyjamas feeling completely inadequate as I ate my cereal watching Tom Daley and Matty Lee bring home a gold medal. It was an incredible thing to watch. And I think, as someone pointed out on Twitter not long afterwards, let's not forget Tom Daley's only 27. For what he's done today and the journey he's been on, that I think most of us would probably feel like we've joined along with him on. It's incredible and it's a beautiful picture. And he's used his platform in the most fantastic way. When he came out, he did it publicly and he said he was doing that to help others. And today he's done that again, which is just absolutely brilliant. His quote to say, "I'm proud to say I'm a gay man and also an Olympic champion," is on the front page of newspapers here and hopefully in other places around the world. And that could only be a great thing if, as he said, if you're an LGBT young person or someone who's not come out yet, to see that sort of role model plastered all over the front pages. And it's just a brilliant, brilliant story.
Yeah, and as you say, still only 27. It's hard to imagine that he started his Olympic career when he was 13, Harry.
It's astonishing, isn't it? All the way back in 2008, all those it was nearly there. He got a couple of bronzes. He was, a superstar of London, but, you could see the pain on his face when he didn't get the gold he wanted, and he's finally there. And, what an inspiring role model. We've been treated to some pretty seriously inspiring role models this summer in the sporting world. But, a man standing there, a proud gay man, winning for Britain, knocking the Chinese out the park, and crying to "God Save the Queen." I mean, I don't how anyone could not be moved by that image. Then I don't know how.
Half expecting you to stand up there.
That's a bit of music if you want.
Ruth and Harry, thanks so much for the moment. We're going to take a break. Coming up, the government's plan to tag burglars after they've been released from jail. We'll be discussing that and more after the break. Do stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching the Press Preview. Still with me, the political editor of Wales Online, Ruth Mosalski, and the political editor of The Sun, Harry Cole. Welcome back to you both. Let's have a look at the Telegraph front page and this story about what to do with burglars once they've served, I think, a sentence of at least a year, being proposed that they wear 24-hour tags. Ruth.
Yeah, so this is the big announcement coming from Downing Street tomorrow, based on the front page of the Telegraph and the Times. So it's the Prime Minister's latest sort of crackdown on criminals, something that he's talked about obviously a lot since his election campaign. I think this is a pilot that's going to be rolled out to further forces. So it's already been in 6 police forces. It's going out to another 13. The idea is that police will be able to check the movements if someone's tag is on constantly. They'll be able to check the movements of where they were when a crime was committed and tally up those two things. It also promises things like a named police officer in every area. There's talk of it changing the stop and search. So it's obviously the latest big ticket item coming from Downing Street. I mean, I think the question that came through my mind when I read this Telegraph front page is, how's this going to be, excusing the pun, policed? We know that relations between Priti Patel and the Police Federation is a low point, to say the least. We know there's not enough police officers on the streets, and Boris Johnson's promised 20,000 more, and we're still, waiting for all those to be there. He says that this is going to give the police and criminal justice system the tools they need to hammer those who persist in breaking the law. But I imagine a lot of police officers reading this and asking, how on earth are they going to be able to do it?
Yes, and Harry, they're talking about increasing stop and search powers as well, and presumably to tag all of these freed burglars. It's going to cost an awful lot of money to monitor the tags and let alone provide them.
Yeah, so this is a classic sort of Boris big picture. Here's the ideas. It's there are some elements of it I think really interesting. There's it's something called drink tags, which monitor sort of criminals who have been released from prison, possibly before the end of their sentence, will be tagged with these tags that monitor their sweat every 30 minutes to take samples of alcohol to stop them drinking once they've been released, because Home Office tonight saying that 39% of violent crimes are linked to alcohol. So there are some really interesting things in there. There sort of feels a little bit like it's all been sort of bundled up to be announced at the same time as the police recruitment numbers are coming later this week. And you get the feeling they're probably going to be quite good for the government on their way to their target of 20,000 police recruits. I thought the really interesting political bit of this, though, tomorrow is the sort of final nail in the coffin of Theresa May's legacy. She spent a decade as Home Secretary, restricting stop and search. And on the steps of Downing Street, she said, it was unjust, it was unfair and discriminatory. And Boris Johnson, within days of getting into number 10 to replace her, began to unpick that and allowed police forces to roll out stop and search, something called Section 60 powers, which gives them more freedom to do stop and search, particularly in the aftermath of a violent incident. So in the aftermath of a stabbing, they're able to search more people to either try and find weapons or to stop reprisal attacks. And that's been piloted ever since Boris Johnson took over in 2019, and it's going to be now rolled out permanently across the country. So I think there'll be, obviously there's going to be a row about police funding, police pay, which, they're not getting the same pay rise the NHS nurses are. So there's a bit of grumbling there. But it'd be interesting to see if there's enough meat in this document, in this policy blitz tomorrow, to see whether that can sort of cut through the noise of a negotiation.
Yes, very interesting that the Priti Patel is quoted as saying that stop and search is a vital tool, a complete change from, as you say, the administration of Theresa May. Ruth and Harry, thank you.